Welcome back to another episode of Worldie Unboxed. Today we're joined by Joey Panella, a former classmate of ours back at Chicago Booth and the founder of Decimal Code, an automated medical coding platform easing the burden on healthcare systems. We'll let Joey provide more details and then catch up on our ventures and share some lessons learned. As always, follow our journey at worldiebrand.com and check out our YouTube channel and Instagram page for more content and updates. All right, let's talk to Joey.
So Joey, can you I know we haven't talked in a while, but can you give an intro for our listeners in terms of, your background, what you're working on, and then we can get into the conversation?
Yeah, sure thing. First off, I'll say great to see you both, and was happy you reached out, asked me on. Sorry, I've been a pain technically to get this set up, but excited to be here now. So my quick background is I am a Michigan BBA to Chicago Booth MBA, which is how I met you both. And I know that I've given a bit of the Decimal Code story, but I am the CEO of an automated medical coding spinout from Michigan Medicine. My co-founders are researchers out of the health system. My role previously, I worked in this leadership development program at Michigan Medicine, and I gravitated towards the commercialization arm of the institution, fancy word for spinning research projects out into startups. And so I left my position at what was the Venture Center as a part of the tech transfer office to go to Booth, functionally to have 2 years to play around and try to get a startup off the ground. And it turns out that I just had developed a really good relationship with my now co-founders, Mike and John at Decimal Code. Didn't screw things up too badly on the business development side. So they asked me to stick on, and then post Booth, I've been running Decimal Code full time for about 9 months at this point.
That's awesome.
That's what's up. How did you meet your co-founders? Were they also Boothies or?
Yeah, good question. So Mike is an anesthesiologist. He's an MD, PhD, kind of like classic academic overachiever. John is a data scientist who's been at Michigan Medicine for over 20 years now. I actually met them. This was back in 2019, where they were pitching for funding for a grant program that I was kind of part of the committee on. I didn't actually really start working with them until 2021 then, where they successfully got funding for the grant. I kind of had followed the project internally at Michigan a little bit. Functionally, they had created some really early machine learning models for predicting billing codes internally at Michigan. The grant funding was for the purposes of running a pilot for the first couple of years. So once I had gravitated to the Venture Center, I was functionally a Swiss Army knife for 100 research spinouts out of Michigan. And wanted to get a little bit deeper into projects because I was pretty surface level. And so Mike and John had really compelling results internally at Michigan. But a lot of researchers would kind of come to our office and go, "Hey, I'm not a business person. I don't know the business side. I want someone to just handle all of that for me." So that's what I started doing, just really basic capacity for them. Putting together a 10,000 foot level plan. And I was actually trying to help them find a CEO back at that point. It just worked out where there wasn't really a match. Once I was leaving to go to Booth, then it was kind of the type of thing where we just wanted to keep working together. At that point, there was no Decimal Code. It was just automated medical coding project internally at Michigan. And it was over the course of the 2 years while I was doing the full-time program that we decided to get things off the ground and really, try to get the startup rolling.
And you were working on a second venture when we were in school, right?
Yeah, that was a mistake. It was a lot of fun. And the intention was I really wanted to use those 2 years getting the MBA as just my free-for-all to try out a startup effort. So this was still before Decimal Code had officially launched, because the company was formed in January of 2023, and I started in the fall of 2022. So this was kind of, I didn't know how things were going to work out with Decimal Code in my role specifically within the company yet. And since my background was really on research commercialization, I wanted to leverage the booth resources to see if I could play around with my own idea. Because I had really enjoyed being in the research space. And there are lots of incredible technologies that really need to be incubated coming out of that. But I was curious to just see, what would it be like if it were my idea from the ground floor and just trying to get things going that way. Well, a buddy and I, buddy on the research side, honestly just started a discovery phase around is there a business opportunity we could have around functionally at scale, trying to help researchers have an easier pathway to taking their technologies, beyond the lab. And it was a really fun opportunity, I'd say. So Bridge was that venture. We did a lot of discovery around the process, made lots of really interesting connections, and went through SNVC with that. But it was really early, really idea stage. And around the same time, there was some momentum starting to happen with decimal code is when we were going through SNVC with that effort. And it was just way too much trying to juggle those two at the same time. And so I really loved the ideas behind Bridge. We could just never really figure out kind of the right model off the start. There was a lot of ideating where it kind of ended up where we went, this is maybe better served as a venture studio or kind of venture accelerator sort of model, because we were really trying to see, okay, how do you help, researchers take things from 0.5 to 1? What would be the revenue model there? Well, the biggest upside is if you can tap into future value of these companies. How do you do that? You get equity. How do you get equity? You give them money, and that's a venture firm. So we're like, okay, we don't really want to go start like a venture accelerator right now. I don't think that makes sense, or anyone would support us in doing that. So yeah, this was like spring of 2023. I was trying to do way too much, and then it was nice to kind of settle in specifically to decimal code and keep some of that like bridge ideas in the back of my head for maybe 10, 20 years down the line.
One of the things you mentioned was that you went to business school basically wanting to explore different entrepreneurial ideas. I was the same way. And now that we're like me and Brandon, I think it's been about 2 years that we've been out of business school. For you, it's been about a year. So looking back, do you think business school is a good place to launch a business? Like, what are some of the pros and cons, do you think?
Yeah, I really do. And here was some of my mental calculus is I know that kind of the traditional entrepreneurial path is you don't pay yourself for a while you're getting things off the ground. And so for me, I kind of considered those 2 years the allotment of time I had to just not need a salary functionally. And that was, kind of my endpoint was okay, if, things really aren't working out at this point, it's probably time to go recruit into a legitimate, legitimately funded company. Plan B was look for like a Series B-ish health tech startup where going from, if decimal code hadn't worked out, to the state it has today yet, I figured at the very least that experience was going to be really meaningful. One, for myself, no matter, what I did next. And then two, just in terms of getting relevant experience in the space, there's, nothing really like trying to get that actual venture off the ground. And then I don't know if every situation, it's like every single MBA program is a perfect year to try or perfect opportunity to try to go do that for 2 years. But specifically, I thought Booth was a really great fit for me personally. It has a lot of really interesting commercialization specific resources that were kind of unique to what I was trying to do. And I liked that it was a really well-renowned program in the Midwest, but didn't necessarily have the same quantity of entrepreneurs as, say, the West or East Coast schools. So it kind of felt like you had a ton of resources and not that much competition to tap into them. So for me, it was a really happy fit to go do it for the 2 years. But I would say that's pretty individual. I think that a lot of people can find value in trying to take an entrepreneurial pathway over those 2 years doing the MBA. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily a guarantee if you don't have maybe at least a good foothold on what sort of direction you want to take things going in.
Yeah. Do you think though, like it depends if you have a scholarship or not, but there's the opportunity cost of, you give up the salary for 2 years and then also the tuition, right? And then additionally putting money into a business. So I mean, I feel like that makes it harder, but I kind of came in with the exact same mindset. This is 2 years where I know I'm not going to make an income. I'm going to try to get this thing off the ground. And then if I need to take a job or do some kind of backup plan, I can do that. But I want to set aside this time just to go after this as hard as I can. And I think business school or grad school is a good forcing function for that. But if you're paying anywhere near full tuition, like the opportunity cost is just so high that it becomes kind of difficult to, unless you've funded yourself, like unless you've raised kind of before you graduate, it can be kind of hard to go full time right after.
Yeah, yeah. I did not get a scholarship or anything, so we were just kind of, really making the bet. I mean, another thing for me was that I was not, bringing in the big bucks before this or anything, right? So part of the calculus too was that sure, the opportunity cost is high, but for myself specifically, it likely wasn't as high as it maybe was for others. And then just sort of the mindset I've had as well is that as long as I can functionally live comfortably with a meaningful plan on the financial side, I've kind of looked at the 20s and 30s as the time to really go out and get the experience. And then hopefully the monetary compensation comes in afterwards. I'd say that, money was never my biggest driver, so to say, to where I think that the risk tolerance I have and just the planning that went into it, right? Like I didn't think I'd come out of the MBA destitute or anything, or if things really weren't looking great with decimal code. Coming out of Booth, I felt pretty confident that I'd be able to recruit into a fairly well-paying job so I could start to, pay off the loans. So it was definitely a consideration. But for me, when I was just kind of looking at things, my two routes pre-Booth were functionally make the leap into a Michigan startup and just see what happens. And with that, I felt pretty uncomfortable just like either not taking a salary for a while. I didn't know if I had the credentials necessarily to hop into the CEO seat or COO seat, something like that. If it weren't for getting the backing of this MBA program, I'm functionally the same person, but people like to see those titles. People like to go through the LinkedIn page and, for better or worse, it's a status symbol that I think was going to help elevate me to the next level. So it was definitely a consideration, but again, just on my personal calculus, the opportunity cost was really more so a factor of I'm either going to try to do this with the Booth background or I'm just going to try to do it independently. And I thought doing the MBA gave me a safety net for in case things didn't work out how I was hoping they might.
Yeah. And you guys also did pretty well at NVCA. So you ended up kind of having some sort of success at Booth. How has that, like, I guess, propelled Decimal Code? And I know you also had some kind of follow on I guess success and some other challenges. So
Yeah, totally. No, we were super fortunate to be able to do well in NVC, raise a little capital beyond that. And I would say the biggest thing is really just momentum, right? Where it's so difficult to break through the noise with a startup that any sort of again, like credential or validation is just meaningful, right? So to have decimal code finish fourth, tied for fourth at NBC and just kind of get a little bit of publicity out of that, open the doors with some conversations that were able to lead to more funding. They really coach the heck out of you when it comes to that pitch setting. So we got 75K as a part of this NVC program, which, it was like 3 months of rigorous practice for it. And then we ended up getting invited to Ann Arbor Sparks Invest 360 event, which was like I had very little context, had functionally no practice for that. And we took first place and got 100K as a part of that, which was I consider it add on from NVC because they just coached us up so much that I don't think we would have finished that successfully if not for that. So one, I would say momentum, and two, it got us to a point where we could really concisely deliver our message and kind of talk through, hey, here's where we are, here are our plans. And as a tech spinning out of a large health system and trying to sell into other health systems, we need runway to have that time to build up the relationships with these systems where it's really difficult and long to sell into a health system, but if you can, it's really sticky and lucrative. So being able to tell that story, gain some momentum to get capital to give us the time to check a lot of those boxes, it really put us on an exciting path. And again, I got pretty fortunate. We were lucky to have some great supporters and people who decided to bet on me, Mike, and John for whatever reason. And so, it's not like we're the greatest success you've ever seen in the startup world, but we're definitely doing it for real. And it's exciting, scary, and all that good stuff.
I mean, you did a lot better in NVC than we did. We applied and we got rejected. You got in and you finished
That was still
fourth
shocking
place.
to me.
I wanted to ask you because I have a pretty good sense of why our idea did not resonate. I don't agree with it, but I have an idea of why they didn't like our idea. What do you think about your idea really resonated with these folks at NVC and some of the other kind of like pitch competitions or whatever?
Yeah, so this is something I can take very little credit for, but the legitimate progress that Mike and John had created inside of Michigan, this was a tech that we knew worked. It just we didn't know if the startup worked, if that sort of makes sense. It was an internal project that saw legitimate success. I could point towards metrics that showed why it was a success, why there was ROI for the health system, and I could prop up my co-founder's validity. And then I think I played the game a little bit, honestly, where I was, going to the office hours of the booth decision makers pre NVC, where I wanted them to know me, kind of get to know the person behind the application and all that good stuff. So I think it was really the validity we had seen within Michigan first, and then two, me getting that FaceTime and contextualizing our story a little bit more. I think that generated a bit of excitement. But I would be curious to hear more because I remember being shocked at the time when you guys didn't get it because I thought it was a shoe-in. And obviously you guys are up to some cool stuff now. So
Why did you think it was a shoo-in? I mean, maybe I'm just fishing for compliments, but yeah.
no, I mean, you guys kind of saw it. I'll put it this way. There weren't a ton of people at booths that were serious about startups as their number one thing and serious about like founding a startup. And to me, you guys were one of like 10 to 20 or so that I saw as serious. And so, I think worldie is a good idea. You're up to some cool stuff. But even beyond that, I thought that like just the idea of, hey, we want to support the people who are doing this for real was going to be like the get it over the mountaintop sort of thing. But that's at least what my perspective was.
No, I mean that resonates with me, and I don't want to get on here and trash NVC or anything like that, but I definitely felt that dynamic too. In terms of there's a number of people who say they're interested in entrepreneurship or they call themselves student founders or entrepreneurs, but you really know the small group of people who are actually serious about it and are actually doing things. And we were definitely in that latter group, and we didn't get accepted into NVC. And there are some people who were not serious who did get into NVC. And that was a bit of a surprise, and it hurt a little bit. I can't lie, but I think it's because the industry is not sexy. You know, footwear, shoes. There's big brands in that space, and if you don't really see the vision, then you're just going to say Nike is already doing this. Nike is going to crush you, and it's going to be really hard for us to carve out a niche in this space, but it's doable. Other companies have done it, so I think it's very easy to understand what we were pitching, poke holes in it and say, this is very hard. I don't trust that you two can do it. So that's the way that I thought about it.
Yeah. What do you
No.
think, Brendan?
Yeah, I think it was very similar, but kind of thinking about the tail end of it, I think it was an opportunity to really kind of self-evaluate, to do some like self-reflection on the idea, like what we were willing to commit to this program, to this venture, I should say, not program. And from that perspective, it was a very positive experience because I think that helped us like double down on our idea, on our passion for the venture. And so, no, it wasn't exactly the result that we wanted when we were, applying or preparing to apply for the program. But all in all, it ended up being something that helped inspire us to continue like pushing forward. And I remember one of the professors who was responsible for, kind of helping us along and maybe providing some coaching as we got closer to the to MVC. And I remember her reaching out and kind of, it wasn't like a rah speech, but it was like, keep your heads up, kind of the situation. I believe in what you're doing, and will be, I guess, a resource for you guys going forward. And so I thought that all that ended up being really positive. Like we missed on some of like the intense coaching that you kind of went through, and I think that could have been helpful when it comes to like this stage when we're thinking about fundraising, which kind of leads me into like the next question for you. Like now that you guys have had a little bit of capital come in the door, you've shown some traction. What is on the horizon when it comes to fundraising? Are you preparing for that? Is it institutional capital? I know you mentioned a strategic like exit potential, but what's the idea when it comes to fundraising?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll close the loop by saying I appreciate hearing you guys' thoughts around all that. And it is awesome that it was more of an inflection point than anything else. And who knows too, right? You guys were both JD MBAs, both had like all this awesome like legal experience lined up, where maybe they were just like, hey, these guys are just going to go be like 7-figure lawyers in the next 5 years and aren't going to keep going with worldie. So I've been stoked following the story, and yeah, it will continue to elude me why they didn't let you on NBC, but it's a little bit of a black box, that whole process. But funding for us specifically, we're at a point where the next milestones, we're still pre-revenue. We're in the final processes of converting Michigan Medicine from like a research hub to an actual client, just a lot of steps and nuances around that. And then we're trying to bring on a couple more systems as well. We've been running complementary pilots, and we feel pretty confident in the direction those are heading in. So when we're looking towards funding, it's really resources to help you achieve the goals you've set out for, right? I know that sometimes funding and kind of like that dollar amount figure can feel like the milestone itself, but it's more so setting the milestones, figuring out what your gap in finances is, and that's what kind of the funding, at least in my opinion, should be looked at as. So if we actually do get 3 customers here in the next 6 months, John and Mike are not going to be able to handle kind of all that workload that would be coming in, right? So we would just need to bring engineers on pretty rapidly to where we're eyeing a seed round, kind of loosely looking at it as late this summer, where you don't really want to count the chicks before they hatch when it comes to these large hospital system contracts, because there's just a lot that goes into it. And the timing, it's difficult to have perfect insights on expectations. So we're trying to get a little bit further down the road, and then really when we're on the cusp of inking those, raise our truer seed round at that point, mostly to get John, who's our CTO at Decimal Code, like a 4 to 6 person engineering team to really just knock it out of the park with these builds at the first few sites and be able to expand our product offerings pretty rapidly.
No, that's cool. And as you anticipate or even loosely think about the idea of fundraising at the sometime in the summer, have you been kicking the tires or doing any kind of like reach outs to VCs or angels or anything like that, just to kind of get some warm intros, or at least kind of like be able to connect with them now, so that later when you're actually doing the fundraising in earnest, it's not like, in the introduction, it's more of like, oh, here's some progress based upon our last conversation.
Yeah, definitely. That's been the goal, where we've had a number of VC meetings at this point, which you're well positioned when you can kind of say, hey, we're good on capital right now. Here are our next stage plans. Once we achieve these things that I'm telling you we're planning to do, would you be interested in giving us money at that point? So we've had probably 50-ish conversations like that, which have been friendly, but friendly when we're not asking for capital. So I've been sending quarterly updates sort of thing, and fingers crossed that when the moment does arrive and we'll kind of be in need of that, that people may be as excited as they were when we were discussing the ideas broadly. And what's kind of been a nice boon for us recently is we were selected as one of 6 startups for this new Northwestern Medicine times Techstars accelerator, which has kind of opened up the network in that sense a little bit too. We've done some other accelerators which have been really helpful, but we're thinking that that's going to open some doors. And it's the type of thing where if we could bring health systems on as our venture partners at the next stage, it would be a pretty exciting model to have somebody on the cap table who's also piloting kind of this tech within their own system. So that's something that we're hoping to, just kind of continue to have these solid intro conversations and potentially get connected to health systems and the venture arms that they have, because that would, capital is always great, but bringing that product and technical help at the next stage and support would be really meaningful for Decimal Code as well.
Yeah, that's what's up, dude. And not to pry too far, so feel free to be like, we'll keep that under wraps. But what what size round are you like loose ballpark thinking about?
Totally. We're looking at about like 2.5, where the goal would be 24 months of runway and bring on 6 engineers for John and then 1 person on the BD side. So that's kind of like loosely how we're looking at it. Again, don't like hold 0.7 or 3.2 or so, because we gotta, it's based somewhat around the revenue projections you have, which are just so assumption driven at this point that I'm going to want to see how things play out a little bit more before saying like for certain it's going to want to be this case. But that's kind of the way that we're eyeing things right now. And we'll have to do our final internal diligence around all that, really, put a bow on our plans. Like, do we need 6 people? Do we need 4? Just kind of figure that out with a bit more certainty. But we'll see, man. We'll see.
Cool. What are the metrics that a VC cares about with a business like yours? Because it's not going to be the same as our business, for example, where you were saying, a few customers makes a huge difference and retention is super high. So what are those metrics that you really have to focus on and kind of knock out of the park for VC to be interested?
Yeah, having a few paying customers or partners is really, I'd say, number one, where it doesn't have to be 20, right? If we have 2 to 5 and they're meaningful relationships, that can be enough. But then it's data around the ROI. So specifically what we do is automate medical coding. Medical coding, it's functionally the way health systems get paid. They submit numerical codes associated with, say, an appendectomy that equate to final reimbursement payments from insurance. Right now, mostly manual, so it's super time consuming. That means high costs, and it's really inaccurate. About 15% of all cases are denied, so the system's just not getting paid on the surgeries they're actually performing. So what we need to show is that we are functionally alleviating these burdens for the health system and that we have legitimate proof that's backed by supporters at these institutions that we're working with that say, hey, we're using Decimal Code. We like Decimal Code. Decimal Code's creating value for us. Here's what we can kind of show through a case study or something like that. So those are probably the 2 biggest things. Besides that, just having, organization and legitimacy around the company. Do you have all your key employees kind of with meaningful agreements? Do you have, is your cap table in order? Since we spun out of Michigan, what does our license look like with the university there? Kind of is everything just from, talking to the JD MBAs, is everything from a legal standpoint, does it pass the tests? So those are kind of what we're working on. And then I keep saying one more thing, but just long-term opportunity, right? Where just from a VC's view of the space, is this an exciting opportunity generally? And then what does the broader ecosystem look like? And, is decimal code uniquely differentiated in a way that I'd be interested in making a bet on them at an early stage?
Are there like many other companies in the space that are competing with you guys, or no?
There's a few directly. Automated medical coding, it's pretty nascent. So the way it's lined up a little bit right now is that our expertise is around procedures. Since we spun out of the anesthesia group, kind of naturally moved into surgery. Other early competitors went more commercial first and have gone after emergency medicine, radiology, bedside, kind of lower hanging fruit areas where you can really prove out value quickly for providers. Not to say that that's not valuable at all. It's super valuable, and a lot of them are doing well, but it's just a little bit different than the angle we're going after. So specifically within automated medical coding, yes, but it's early. More broadly, if you call it like revenue cycle AI, there is a lot. And so there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of need for us to, specifically and concisely show how we differentiate ourselves, because a chief revenue officer from a health system is seeing, 10,000 things a year, right? And so how does decimal code really showcase that we've got something unique and compelling? It's a challenge, and it's the type of thing where cold outreach isn't going to do it a lot of times. So how do you make meaningful connections with some health system and then really have them be your biggest champion as you're trying to go to system 2, 3, 4, 5?
So what do you guys actually fall under in terms of like industry? Like, is it fintech? Is it health tech? Like where does it fall in? And like, does that affect how you interact with, institutional investors that you're talking to? Like they're trying to like, I guess, pigeonhole you into some category. Like where do you fall? Where do you say you fall?
Yeah. The categories are all a little made up, right? But I mean, we say like health tech is probably where we fit in most. Like if a VC has on their thesis, health tech is something we're interested in, they're likely looking at rev cycle AI, coding, billing, call it health system operational side. Um, the way we've kind of pitched long term is that coding is really our expertise, what we know we're really good at, but the space itself, it's kind of like a health system is a boat with 100 holes in it, right? And so right now we're trying to plug one big hole, but you've really got this documentation issue, this coding issue, this billing issue. So we're hopeful that we can kind of start specific and then really prove ourselves out as a partner for a lot of these systems, and potentially take our process and help out in other areas as well. So we, consider ourselves more health tech, and that's more of the flavor of investor we've been speaking to. And then if it's more of a system VC, they're kind of looking at potential investment upside opportunity, but a lot of it is informed by just what is the hair on fire for me internally, right? And let's see about, getting an early stage startup in to potentially help with that. A lot of systems like pre-seed, seed stage is maybe too early. Some will, take the leap at that stage, but traditionally healthcare is not the most innovative sector for lots of good reasons, right? You want to make sure that everything's really lined up with patient care, and that's always the focus of the institution. So playing around with new tech isn't always the best use of resources, but there's a lot to kind of support investments at more of the Series B and beyond stage. And so we're really trying to see if we can find the right partner at this earlier stage.
Yeah, oh, that makes sense. You mentioned, and I could probably deduce like what it is, but maybe it's something different. Internally, you guys might be thinking something different. Product market fit, like what when do you think that will be achieved, and what do you think it is?
Yeah, can I maybe ask a dumb question? But what does product market fit mean to you guys?
I don't know. I thought Aaron had a really good definition of it.
Forgot my definition. I was just about to say that. I came up with it in the moment and I forgot it. I can find the recording and I'll have to like jog my memory around it. But the way that I think about it, it's basically selling enough product to the right customers in a way that solves a meaningful problem, and you sell it at a price, and like you run the business in a way where you can actually survive, right? Because you could sell, like you could give away your software for free and you could probably get like crazy adoption rates, but that's not sustainable. So I wouldn't say that that's product market fit. But when you have enough customers and enough revenue to be like, this is a legitimate business, we can scale this thing, and when we scale it, we're going to be making more money versus just magnifying our losses. So that's kind of the way that I think about it. It's like solving a problem in the market and doing it in a way where you're not just lighting money on fire.
I like that definition. So I think no need for the recording. I think that was
Okay, cool. No, I like it. It's always been a little bit of a vague idea to me. Where like I think I know what it means, but it's kind of a buzzy thing within startups at times. So I mean, for me, the way that I would probably put it then, because I like your view on it a lot, Aaron, and I guess Brandon by association and support, is 18 months after we sign our first paying customers when I expect to have like true product market fit. Where if I think about if I were in the seat of a chief revenue officer right now, like they'd be making a bet on decimal code fundamentally. Like we've had really good success inside of Michigan, but not as a product necessarily, right? Like what a good amount of our early raise has gone to has been building out the product, where, we've kind of had this engine that works really well inside of Michigan, but we've got to get it in a space that's ready to really drop in place at another institution. There are considerations around like the EHR integrations that are really important for just not creating a bunch of work for IT teams that we're really going to be working with. So for now, it's this, in my view, exciting ball of clay, right? Where, part of what we're pitching to systems is, hey, you get to help inform what this is going to be, right? And so you can really make it something that's going to be incredibly awesome for you. And maybe it won't be as awesome for the 50th customer, because it's, at that point going to be a little bit more commoditized and not the type of thing that's as easy to maneuver a bunch. But while we're still maybe in this more agile phase, that's probably before we've really hit full product market fit. So we know that the solution is there in some capacity, and we know the route we are going to take within a system to provide ROI pretty quickly. But there's going to be some information and just some direction we'll need from the system when we're really building this out. And I think that once we can solidify a lot of that, and we've done it all within Michigan, right? So my CTO John likes to joke that if you've seen one health system, you've seen one health system. So we've got a product, but a product that fits at Michigan, right? For more of a market ready product, we need something that is ready to go across other systems more easily. And so in my head, that'll be about an 18-month process of once we've kind of started to get customers on to take that necessary discovery steps to, get it a bit more set.
You mentioned that product market fit is kind of a vague term. It's a bit of a buzzword in the startup space. What other things do you feel like before this experience, you're kind of like, oh, it seems like this is really important, but then once you actually do it, you're like, that's not a real concept that really matters, or people kind of make too much of it. Or is there anything like that you can think of?
That's a really good question. There's definitely a number of kind of like, call them fuzzy topics or things that maybe will garner a lot of attention. Even so, there's two things that come to mind off the top of my head. One, going back to your view on worldie and NVC, where it's kind of like you were saying you could understand why a reviewer for NVC maybe thought that Nike was just going to do this or something, right? To me, I don't know if it's necessarily a buzz term, but just the idea that an early stage startup is going to have all of these things de-risked is just so frustrating to me, because I'm like, if we had all of this, like we would not be in a position where you would be able to invest, right? Like we would have millions of dollars. Like if I could answer all of these questions with perfect clarity, it's because we would have already done them. We would have already validated all these things through the market and bringing in customers and having a profitable business model. And so that's what gets like frustrating to me is I'm like, yes, we don't have these things, but if we did, we wouldn't be like a pre-seed stage company, trying to take these steps to get things off the ground. So I'd say that I don't know if that's like a buzzy concept, but just the idea of like the check marks needed around a startup at sometimes it's a little bit unrealistic. And then the second one for me would more so be call it the hockey stick financial growth, where it is just so assumption driven. I don't know if you guys have ever gotten like feedback around your 5-year pro forma in an investor deck or something, where somebody's just like, oh, year 4, we would really expect it to be like this. I'm like, okay, then I'll change the variable. It's algebra. I'll go in and like change the input figure. But I'm like, guys, what are we doing here? Like, if we agree on the assumptions that are going into the model, that's the important piece. Matter what I say the year 4, year 5 revenue figures are going to be, because that's going to be just dead wrong, right? Like, we're pre-revenue. I can't tell you what our growth is going to look like with 100% certainty. I can tell you what our pricing model is and what our expectation around how many customers we're going to have and how many modules that means we're going to have sold, and what I think the growth will look like once we when are we going to reach 5, 10, whatever. But that's like a frustrating one to me when somebody has some criticism around the financial projections, because I'm just like, what are we doing here? Like, that's not like, it's wrong. Like, you're right, it's wrong.
People love fake numbers.
Yeah.
But
Do you guys have any particular ideas that are frustrating, or that you kind of roll your eyes at when you see it?
I agree with what you said so much, especially the first one, where it's like a lot of times VCs or people who are looking at your business plan, they just say the most obvious thing. It's like, well, of course, I know that. Like, yes, we need to acquire customers, and yes, it's expensive to acquire customers. Yes, this is in a product that is expensive to create. Yes, that means that margins will be hard to keep high. Like, these are all obvious things, and yes, we need to get a marketer that's really good. We know that. And if you say like, hey, you don't have this marketer on your team right now, we're like, we know we're working on that. If we had that person right now, then we would put it on the page. And like you were saying, if we had all these things figured out or in place, we probably wouldn't need your money. Or if we did need your money, like, the terms would be a lot more favorable to us. So that drives me crazy as well. And it's almost like people think that you don't know this. Like, they're just telling you things that you know you need to do. You just haven't necessarily done it yet. So that drives me crazy. And then the other thing, in terms of hockey stick growth, I was thinking about this recently, and you're a hockey player too, so you'll understand what I mean by this. But I think a lot of times it's almost like reverse hockey stick growth, or like, I don't know, like inverted, reflected. I don't know the right term, but instead of like hockey stick growth, it's basically like the blade and then the shaft, right? So a little bit of time where you're flat and then you go up like crazy. I think it's the opposite, where it's the shaft first, where it's a long time, very low, and then you get into the blade, like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the road. So I think there's just, I mean, I kind of bought into that hockey stick growth idea, but good things take time, great things take even longer. And if you come into this thinking you're going to be a success overnight, you're probably going to be disappointed and you might be discouraged. And I think that the ecosystem would be better off if we stopped kind of lying to people and just showing outliers and saying that this is the expectation.
yeah, no, I agree with those two qualms. And I'm not a hockey player, but I've seen hockey sticks, so that makes. I think one of the other things that is, a bit annoying is when within the conversation, it starts drifting towards externalities. Like, we start talking about incumbents or something like that. I'm like, it's like being on a date and you're talking to somebody and, you're hitting it off. And then all of a sudden they start talking about somebody else, like some other, like, oh, but what about, so-and-so, or, like, whoa, this is weird. This is odd. This is supposed to be a conversation about us. And so I think that is a bit distracting, and it kind of like dilutes the point that you're trying to make if you're constantly having to redirect the conversation back to like what the focus should be on. And it should be like, you should be dissecting like, our business. You should be kind of, trying to understand it, as opposed to running some kind of a, comparison, like, oh, what about this? What about that? I just don't think it works out like that. And then for us, I think our industry is a bit different. In tech, the traditional hockey stick form might actually work out for them. You've seen companies who have like 0 to 4 billion ARR in 4 years or whatever. So you see these like crazy like unicorns. Whereas consumer, it typically doesn't happen like that. You have to like spend a lot of time proving yourself in that industry, in that space, and proving to outside institutional investors that you are a serious horse in this race. And I think about like certain mantras that people who have been successful, and maybe like Raising Cane's isn't an exact comparison. It's not a comp for worldie, but I think about like Todd Graves, the founder of Raising Cane's, and it's, to them, it was solely being focused and being able to endure for a long period of time. So like Raising Cane's was started, I don't know, like 30 years ago, and he was doing like one thing for that entire time, selling chicken fingers. And it's now that like they are really reaping the benefits of like that consistency and that endurance. And I think the same thing will, hopefully not 30 years, but hopefully like it's a shorter time frame. But I think we're closer to that type of model than the traditional hockey stick. 2 years, you're hitting 2 billion ARR or something like that. So I those are some frustrating things that kind of come up.
There's one other thing that one of the points you made kind of reminded me of this, but a lot of times, like a saturated market is viewed as a bad thing. So people will say, oh, there's already a ton of players in this space. But if a lot of times saturated markets are huge and you don't have to validate that there's demand in that space, you just have to do it better than someone else in the market. And there's a huge risk to trying to create a new market, because there's a good chance that market doesn't exist because there's not demand for that product. Like there's a lot of education that comes with that, and I would say in general, it's easier to convince someone to switch products. So like you already buy a product, switching from product A to product B or brand A to brand B, that's easier than saying like, you don't buy anything in this space right now, but I'm going to try to convince you to spend however much money on this product that you've never owned before. So I think a lot of people also overcomplicate it a little bit and try to do something that's just completely novel. But if you go after a space where there's a ton of demand and you make it 5% better for the same price or for like a very comparable price, then you can have a super successful business that way too.
Yeah, definitely. It's if there's no competition, you're probably not solving a real problem. And it might, just a quick anecdote, when I was working at Michigan, just helping out with a lot of spin outs. My favorite hockey stick growth I ever saw, and I won't name the startup. I think they're about now. But it was a financial view where year one, the revenue projection was 0. Year 2, it was 120,000. And year 3, it was 95 million. I was like, all right, guys, year 3. That's a big year. That's that's exciting stuff. So at the time, the team advised that maybe they make it, it's still hockey stick, but ramp up a little bit more naturally.
We'll wrap up with a few rapid fire questions. So the first one is, what keeps you up at night about your business?
Yeah, the idea that I'll screw something up. I'd say that just like the responsibility that comes with being a startup founder is probably what's hit me more than anything else. So I know there's a lot of like externalities, and if Decimal Code doesn't eventually end up being a success, it's likely not directly attributable to me, but just the idea that you have so much control within this that can be scary at times, and you don't want to let that fear paralyze you. But just when it's your first time doing this, it's a lot of newness and scariness, and so that's kind of, for me, it's kind of a continuous evaluation of, am I doing enough and am I doing it good?
Do those feelings ever feel like a burden or no?
There have definitely been times where I've gone like, after this, I just like, I'm not going to be, I need to take like a few years and just be not the key, like top decision maker just for a little bit. But at the same time, it's addictive, right? And just being able to have the things that you really feel conviction about, being able to move in that direction at the speed you want to be able to do it. I would say that draw overcomes kind of that fear, right? Of, oh no, like, am I doing a good enough job around this? Because that's just kind of natural self-doubt, right? I think if I would have screwed up really bad by this point, somebody would have told me, booted me, whatever, by this stage. But I would say that that was probably the surprise for me around founding Decimal Code, is just the weight of the responsibility I felt even at, this early stage.
And what would you say has been the hardest part so far?
Yeah, the hardest part is just broadly, I'd say proving ourselves, if that kind of makes sense. One, it's market driven. One, it's just driven by us, the team, as first time founders. It's difficult to sell into health systems. The bar is really high. It's not like, in school, the pathways are easy. Like, turn in this homework, take this test, like, study up to this. You get a 83 in the class, right? Selling into a health system, it's just this twisty, turny pathway that each one looks a little different. It's kind of hard to figure out exactly the way to communicate, exactly the plans to put in place for a given system. Do they want us to be more firm and here's exactly how the install looks like? Or do they want us to go, hey, we can be really amenable to what you need? So getting to that stage has been really difficult. And then just, this would be so much easier if this were my fifth time, leading a startup, right? Just the network connections, the immediate validation somebody would see around, oh, I recognize, company 3 that you worked with before. And so it being my first time, my co-founder's first time doing it, we're really leaning on their research credentials, which is great when it comes to validity of the tech, but validity of the company, it's you've just got to constantly prove yourself.
Yeah. And what would you say has been the most rewarding part so far?
I would say probably two things. One would be the relationships, and then two, just the ownership I've felt over the successes. The relationships have been really exciting. I would say a lot of it's with my co-founders. Like, I know a lot of people are friends beforehand or kind of, cooking up ideas for a while. I didn't know Mike and John before I kind of got introduced to them in the Michigan medicine context. And so one thing that, I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of this if, one, I didn't just like them, and two, if they didn't like support me in my growth in a lot of this process and kind of just put a lot of trust in me. And I think it's pretty easy. It's really difficult for things to, go on a good path, and it's pretty easy for things to unravel. And so I would just say that I am really happy with how that relationship has developed, the support that we've kind of had, the trust that we've had in each other. And then I think we've had a lot of great supporters, be it, just friends we've met in the community. Like, I wouldn't have hung out with you guys if we weren't kind of doing this stuff around Booth, and you get to see what other people are working on, which is really cool and inspiring. Like, when I get stressed because you're so in your own thing for a while, it's so just nice to talk to somebody else who's building, right? Because you can kind of get out of your head, just can kind of connect in that manner. And then so the second idea, I would say, around kind of that ownership of the success, like when we pitched at NBC or at, Spark Invest 360, like that was me doing it, right? So there's, directly attributed, like $175,000 directly attributable to me, like right there. Like it's it's weird to say, like it sounds odd, and it's hard not to be or come off as like egotistical, but those were like, things that I achieved. And there's a lot of really difficult parts of this process. And so when you have those moments, and there's not a ton of like, you're standing up at a podium and somebody announces like the way, like that's a very early stage, like pitch competition driven thing and just an anecdote, but it's really, you're so embedded in the stress all the time that I'm trying to like enjoy the successes more. And so in those moments, particularly, I found it really just rewarding to kind of see things like that come to fruition.
And what do you know now that you wish you knew when you started?
Yeah, I would say I was oftentimes looking for a golden ticket around. I kind of, I think both my co-founders, Mike, John, and I, we all kind of have a good perspective of what we know and what we don't know. And so in my head, I think I over-indexed on that a little bit at times. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to sell into a health system, so we're just going to find somebody and they're going to, know exactly how to do it. Or I don't know if I should be the ultimate decision maker on this. Maybe it should be John. Maybe it should be an advisor we have. And so I think it took me a little bit of an adjustment period to go, oh no, all of these things are just me. Right? Like it's a lot of things that I think I was looking for somebody outside with the perfect skill set or knowledge to come in and say, here's exactly how to do it, or even I'll go do it for you. And what I've realized is just that I've got to go do all those things, right? And that I've got to, grow into a lot of those. Like it's not like I'm awesome at selling into health systems right now, but I've learned a lot. I've practiced a lot. I've gotten a lot of reps, and now we have a much better idea of kind of where to go. And so I think that I was hoping that when it came to certain skills, we'd just be able to jump from 0 to 1, right? When really it was something to where myself and Mike and John had to kind of develop into those aspects. And so that's probably what I would say, just the mindset around knowing that, hey, just a lot of this, it has to be me, even though that's not like my expertise right now. That's just, it's got to be my decision. It's got to be my activity.
What advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs?
Find friends. It's really like difficult to do it on your own. Find co-founders you like. It's got to be fun, right? Like it's like a difficult endeavor, and it's a more stressful endeavor than I would have figured. But it's so much fun, right? And you just get to learn and do all of these things. It's much more, it's like anything. It's much more fun when you're doing it with other people, when you can share your success with them, you can share in their successes. It's a unique thing that you're doing. And so people want to hear about it oftentimes, right? People are curious about things. People want to be a part of your process, want to help if they can. And I know there's kind of sometimes these ideas of just head down and just do all this, but just it should be fun too, right? And I think that ultimately people are what kind of are going to make it fun. At least, for me, that's what I've seen.
What does success look like for you? However you want to define that with this business, in life, what does success look like?
Impact and comfort. Like I think the reason you kind of get into this first is that I think that startups are the best vehicle to quickly create impact, and kind of, why I got into entrepreneurship in the first place was just the idea that you could start with a problem and work on, building a solution from there. I think there's a lot of avenues you can do it within a more corporate space, but I think that that's really compelling to me, that if we're able to go in and actually help alleviate a lot of these burdens, or even just be part of a competitive space where eventually healthcare becomes more efficient from an administrative practice, like that's exciting. Like that's real impact. And I'd love to be able to like point to, hey, this is what my work helped to achieve. And then comfort's more of the individual side, where it's partially just one mindset, where how do I become just more comfortable in this sort of role on a day-to-day basis? And then two, everyone would be lying if you're not financially motivated in some sense, right? So I would love to get to a place where I don't have to make money to work, right? Where I can kind of pursue things for the greatest degree of impact for that kind of alone, versus, thinking about the financial upside of all this. Do we exit at this stage or this stage? Like, what would that mean on a return for me? So comfort in just the financial success you hope to achieve, but also the place that something like that can put you in, where I just think it gives you a greater platform and flexibility to maybe create some of that impact that we all kind of got into this for the first one.
And is there anything that you want to plug just at the end of the podcast?
Sure. If you're a chief revenue officer of a major health system, come check out Decimal Code. We're a pretty specific niche thing, but I'll say, if anyone's interested in chatting, anyone's interested, if any of this connected with you, if you're working in kind of this healthcare rev cycle administrative space, always happy to connect. But that's me. I'm fully wrapped up in Decimal Code, and we got a really specific sales cycle. So I'd love to be more effective plugging, but that's kind of my base plug at the end of here, guys.
I like it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Well, thanks for coming on. It was super fun to catch up and hear what you've been up to. And it sounds like a lot of success, and hopefully more success to come.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And are you guys both still out in Chicago?
No,
I'm actually in Denver.
And I'm in Seattle.
Okay. Well, I will not say let's get together next time. But Aaron, I know you're from Detroit area at least. So if you're ever back
I'm
in
flying back
this
to
neck of the woods,
I'm flying back to Detroit in May. So
okay.
yeah, we can. You live in Detroit area, the Detroit area now?
I'm like Ann Arbor, so I'm just outside. So if you're back, Brandon, if you're ever in this area, Chicago, yeah, would be fun to catch up over a beer like this. This is really good seeing you guys,
Yeah,
but
I'll definitely hit you
love
up because I'm gonna be back in Michigan soon. So I'll let you know.
awesome, man. Awesome.
Cool.
Well, best of
All
luck.
right, guys. Well, great to see you.
Hey, you too, man.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming on.
yes.
All right.
All
Have a
right,
good one.
later. You too. Bye.